So you're looking at getting a pair of Lake shoes. Well, here's our guide on which shoe you should choose and why. So Lake do a massive range of road shoes in different price points and with different features, but the most important feature of a Lake shoe is the fit. And you have to think of Lake shoes a little bit differently from every other brand of shoe out there, because Lake do different shapes of shoe, which not all brands do. So the first thing you've got to think of with Lake shoes is which fit suits me best, and that will narrow down your selection really quickly. Lake cycling shoes come in three main different shapes, which we call lasts. We've got the sport last, competition last, and race last. The lasts are denoted by the numbers of the shoe. So we have a CX1 something, we have CX2 something, and we have CX3 something. There is also a CX4 something, which is a CX403, which is their custom moldable shoe, which does fit in the race last category, but it is out on its own because it is custom moldable. Let's start by talking about the shape differences between the three lasts. So starting at this end, we've got our competition last shoes, and these are the widest fitting shoes out of all of the Lake range. They do come in two different widths, regular and wide, but bear in mind that not all regulars and not all wides will fit the same because you've got different shapes of shoe. And this is where Lake's sizing chart is really useful, because it lays out all of the width measurements in millimeters, so you can see exactly what the difference is between all three of these lasts. So these are the widest fitting shoes. They also have a much squarer toe box than the race last, for example, which is a lot narrower. The sport last is very similar to the competition last in that it still has a slightly squarer toe box and it is still quite wide fitting. Just note that these are slightly narrower fitting than these, but again, they're just very similar in terms of shape. The race last are out on their own because they've got a narrower fitting profile and a narrower toe box. They do come in three different widths though. They come in narrow, regular, and wide. So again, just remember that not all regular and wides are going to be the same regular and wides as these, because they're a different shape, but you do have three different options with these shoes, whereas with these you have two. So if that's just blown your mind already, then this is kind of the good and the bad thing about Lake shoes, is that there is so much variation and so many differences between each models that it does sort of upset the apple cart in the way that other shoe brands are made and created and marketed and sized. But the really good thing about this is that you have so many different options for so many different shapes of feet that you can just find the perfect shoe that fits your foot shape exactly. So it is quite hard to just, without knowing much about Lake shoes, to just pick one off the shelf or pick one online and choose the perfect shoe. So this is one of the reasons why it's so much better to go and see someone about buying a Lake shoe, to get this advice and get this clarification around the differences between all the shoes. Because without knowing this, it's really unlikely that you'll pick the perfect shoe. And again, the differences between Lake and other brands is that not all models are the same. Not all the more expensive shoe isn't going to fit you better necessarily than a cheaper shoe. It's just the shape that fits you best. So now you've chosen a shape of shoe, it's time to pick a model within that last. So we're going to start with the sport last shoes, and there is only one main model of road shoe within the sport last. And these are a CX1 series shoe, remember? So these are a CX177, for example. So yeah, these are the main road shoe. Unless you want a winter shoe or winter boot, then these are the ones to choose. It is important to note that these shoes only come in full EU sizes, so they don't do half sizes, whereas with every other shoe or model, you can get a half size. So if you need a half size shoe in terms of length, then you'll want to go for something in the competition last, which we'll talk about in a minute. But if these do fit you in the full sizes, then these are a good option to go with. Again, they're a nylon sole, they only have one BOA dial, so it's to try and keep it at a cheaper price point. But the fit of the shoe is, like I say, the most important bit. If these shoes fit you in terms of shape and size and width, then these are going to be a really good option. And again, these come in a regular and a wide fit, so you've got two different options of width to suit your foot. Another thing I quickly forgot to mention with these shoes is that this is one of the only Lake shoes that doesn't have an adjustable cleat track. So the cleat holes are actually screwed into fixed positions on the sole of the shoe rather than being slidable forward and back. So a little bit less cleat adjustment with the CX177. Next, we'll move on to the competition last. So this shape of shoe is the widest fitting shoe that Lake do. And again, Lake shoes are typically wider than every other model or brand of shoe. So a wide fitting shoe in a Lake is a very wide fitting shoe. In the Bike Fit studio, these are a really popular shape. These do seem to fit a lot of people really, really well because again, a lot of other brands and models don't offer a shoe this wide. So for people who are struggling to find a wide fitting shoe, these are good options to go with. So within this within this range, we have 3 main road shoes and a 4th one, which we'll come to at the end. We've got the CX219. So these are a CX2 series model. CX219, we've got a CX239, and we've got a CX242. So these are all carbon soled shoes. So I think having a stiff carbon soled shoe is a really good benefit for spreading pressure from the pedal and from the cleat over a large surface area under your foot. Keeps things nice and comfortable under there rather than getting hot spots. So I do think a carbon sole is a good upgrade from a nylon soled shoe. There are a few other main differences between these shoes, some of which are very obvious and some of which are a bit more subtle. The main difference between the CX219 and the others is that you only get one Boa dial with the 219 rather than having one on the toe box as well. And it's a slightly lower volume shoe, just with the way it closes compared to the others, and the lack of a second Boa dial makes the volume a little bit less adjustable. The CX239 is somewhat similar to the CX219, just with a few subtle differences. You've got 2 Boa dials on here. It's a slightly lighter weight shoe. You've got sort of thinner material around here rather than the squishier 219. And the way that it closes means there's a lot more volume control in the shoe. So if I just open this shoe right out, you can see how the wraparound closure of this shoe means that the instep of the outsole of the shoe actually comes up and over the top of your foot and then closes down in that way rather than coming in from the 2 sides like it does with the 219. So it just means that it can suit the volume of your foot and be a bit more adjustable than the 219. The third shoe that we'll talk about in the CX2 series range, the competition last, is the CX242. Now, these look a bit different to every other shoe, but for very good reason. And again, these are really quite popular with people who have had problems with feet or trying to get their feet comfortable and finding a shoe to fit. There's a couple of main features that you don't get with the other shoes in the CX2 series range. We've got an elasticated mesh as the first layer of this shoe. So whatever your foot shape, the mesh will sort of stretch and mold to your foot almost. And on top of that mesh, you've got these panels. So each of these panels can fit independently of each other. So if you've got any bony bits or lumpy bits on the outsides of your feet, then these panels will just sit nicely and accommodate those lumpy bits so that they're not causing pressure and rubbing on the sides of your feet. And if you've not already guessed, these shoes were originally designed for people with bunions. And again, they work really, really well with people with bunions who had massive problems trying to find a cycling shoe that doesn't irritate the bunion. Because you can have that panel sitting wider than everything else and still close the rest of the shoe perfectly around your foot without compromising that bunion. They can of course fit people without bunions. You don't have to have a bunion for this to be a really comfortable shoe. They are actually really useful for people who are cycle touring or doing massive endurance and things like that, or cycling in hot weather. Because of the elasticated mesh, if your feet swell or change as you go along these ultra endurance rides, then the shoe will just change with your foot, which is such a cool feature and make sure that your feet are comfy for very long periods of time. They're also very well ventilated, so again, in hot weather, if you want to keep your feet cool, these are a really good shoe. One of the other features that you don't get with these 2 shoes in the competition last range is the moldable heel cup. So these can actually go in the oven and you can shape the heel to fit as snugly as possible around the heel of your foot. So this helps with heel retention, so that when you're pedaling, the sole of your foot and the heel is kept nicely in the shoe without having to lift up and down. And it's again just another really nice feature that means that you can fully adapt this shoe to the shape of your foot. Finally, it's worth mentioning that in the competition last, you also have a CX21C shoe, which is a lace-up model of shoe. So if you like the look of laces, or just prefer laces to boa dials, or want to save a bit of weight, then these are a really nice option. I'm going to insert a little picture or video here so you can have a look at those. The shape of the shoe is exactly the same as with all competition last shoes. It just has the lace-up fitting so that you can have that as an option as well. Next, we'll move on to the CX3 series shoes, which is the Race Last. So these are a CX302, and we've also got a CX333 here. Now, these shoes are, like we said before, a narrower fitting shape. They also have a narrower toe box, but they do come in 3 different widths. They come in narrow, regular, and wide. And that is different to these other 2 lasts. These 2 lasts don't do a narrow. So if you do have particularly narrow feet, then these are a good option to look at. Again, remember that Lake's range and Lake's sizing is generally a bit wider than every other shoe brand, so a narrow fitting shoe in a Lake is probably akin or similar to other brands' regular fitting shoes. So the main differences between these 2 shoes, we've got the boa dial positioning. So these boa dials are slightly tighter together up the top of the foot, and then these are much more spread out, much wider positioning. That may or may not be a good thing for you. It kind of depends where the bony bits on the top of your feet are and where they sit. Sometimes you might have a bony bit on the top of exactly where this boa dial sits, in which case you might want to go for this, or vice versa. So there's no right or wrong there, they're just different options. The CX302 is a much lighter weight shoe. It's much more of a climbing shoe, which, you know, if you're a weight weenie watching this, then that's something that you might want to consider. They're both carbon soled. Another difference is the material and the ventilation used within these shoes. Again, because this is a lighter shoe than the 333, there's a bit more venting going on, which again is great for hot weather. And the material itself is a bit lighter, whereas this is a full leather shoe, which we'll talk about more later. The other big difference between the 302 and the 333 is volume. Now volume, if you don't know, volume is the sort of height of the shoe really, so the space that you've got between the sole and the top of the closure. The 302 is a much smaller volume shoe than the 333. Again, going back to what we said earlier about the closure, these do close from the left and the right, whereas the 333 does have this closure that goes up and over the foot from the instep. So that helps give the 333 a lot more of a bigger volume. So if you do have quite tall feet or high volume feet, then you'll probably want to choose the 333 over the 302 from a fit point of view. So going back to the material of the shoe, as I said, the 333 is a full kangaroo leather shoe, and this leather does soften with time, so it does become really, really supple, which is such a nice feature because they almost just become like a pair of slippers, the way that the leather softens around your foot. So if there are any areas that need to soften, then it naturally will pretty quickly, just with some riding time. So the leather's a really nice feature, and then the other extra feature you've got on this shoe versus the 302 is a moldable heel cup again, just to help with that heel retention. The 302, on the other hand, if you are looking for something a bit more ventilated, a bit cooler, a bit lighter weight, then this is a really good option. And as you can see, this is my cycling shoe of choice. So there are the differences between all of the main Lake road shoes. They all come in different color options, and some of them even have different material options, such as the 238, which is available in leather, or Clarino microfiber they call it, which is a bit of a lighter weight, thinner material. So there are loads of different customization options with these. You can also get split sizing, you can also get custom colors. So there's some really, really nice options with these. You can sort of design and color to your heart's content with certain models. So if you do have any other questions about some of the shoes, or if there's anything I've missed that you want to know, leave us a comment down below or drop us a message at ukbikefit.com, And if you want to come and see us to get sized up for a set of Lake shoes, we do a free sizing appointment where you can come in, we'll have a look at your feet, we'll measure you up, we'll talk through the options and talk through the range and make sure we get you the perfect fitting shoe.